Welcome to this Roll for Crit expansion review. You're invited to join us as we take a look at Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, Secrets and Soirees. This is the first expansion for this tile drafting game in which you are building castles for the Mad King Ludwig, and he's decided that you have to build two castles. In the base game, you'd be drafting tiles at different rune types and be building castles between the players next to you. Your goal is to build the castles similarly in scores, as you'll only be scoring the lower value castle between the two you have. In this expansion, you'll have not only some more tiles to play with of the regular room types, but some new room types to deal with as well.
In the standard game of Between Two Castles, you are drafting hands of these little room tiles, passing them to your neighbors when you're finished. Each turn, you choose two of these tiles and decide between the castle to your left and the castle to your right where you want those rooms to go. Of course, you're going to be making that decision with the partners to your left and right as well. And none of that has changed in this new expansion. Those core rules are still the same. You place these where the two of you agree that they would be best suited, and each tile has different scoring conditions based on where it is in the castle or what tiles are around it. There are a couple of new big important tile types in the Secrets and Soirees expansion. First one we'll talk about are activity rooms with this little guitar in the corner. These represent all kinds of things. We've got a painting room and a billiards room here, and they will give you a point for each tile that is next to them in this configuration, so orthogonally, but they will only be worth 1 point total if a tile of a certain type is anywhere in the vicinity of them. So in this instance, it's the orange utility rooms. So with these activity rooms, it's less important what is next to them, more important what is not next to them. You're trying to keep them away from certain colors of tiles. Every tile has a certain bonus if you get enough of them. That's true of these activity rooms as well. Getting 3 of those activity rooms in your castle rewards you with a ballroom tile. You'll get a few of these and be able to choose one to place somewhere in your castle, and these ones score based on what are in the castles adjacent to the one they're placed in. So the castles to the left or right, whether they technically belong to you or not. For instance, this one here gets 1 point for each activity room in the castles next to it. So this is something that's going to require you to actually look at what's going on in other castles. They're not just going to be concerned with the things around them in this particular one right here. Another big new tile type is the secret room. Secret rooms, hence the title, Secrets and Soirees. These are very interesting in that they do not have a base power or scoring ability of their own. Instead, they have this arrow you can see, and whatever that arrow is pointing at, they duplicate that tile. And yes, if there is a secret room pointing at a secret room, they will duplicate whatever tile that secret room is pointing at. So you can come up with a crazy chain of secret duplicates if you want to. So these can be really powerful because you can use them to completely replicate certain powerful scoring room tiles, or maybe boost up some that aren't quite as strong for you. And they also, of course, have some little tokens here because you're going to need to keep track of exactly what type that room becomes. That is going to be important for scoring. It will count as that color for anything else that it needs to look at that for. Of course, with these new tiles and tile types, you get a nice new plastic insert that will go along with the ones in the original game. So you'll have plenty of room to hold all the things that are new in this set. You also get new score pads that have the addition of the new things in there. So you'll be able to easily tally up everyone's points without having to worry about what's not in the original pads.
In addition to what you saw there of new room types, and of course there's going to be just more new tiles of maybe the types you've seen before of sleeping rooms, outdoors, etc. We've also got a lot of new rule sets for you to mess around with. First off, let's go with the really simple one, another new player, which means a new castle. But we've also not only do have a new rule set where the Mad King is letting you each build your own castle, as well as new 2-player rule sets, we actually have solo variants in here so you can play if you have no one else around. There's the Autumn Up, in which you play against 2 different sort of robots for you to play against. And then there's the introvert rule set. That's a much simpler sort of back and forth with one person. Regardless of which mode you're playing, they play sort of similarly, just one's a bit more complex. Both of them, you'll use these tiles because the way they build the castle is they are just looking for tile types and they score based on the number they have in that row. So the more oranges they have, the more points the AIs will get. Now, depending on whether you're playing with just the introvert mode when you play against one opponent versus the Automa mode where you play against 2, they may signal what rooms they prefer in terms of which means they're more likely to pick those, or they're just going to go with whatever. Another thing that they share is this deck of cards. You're going to shuffle at the beginning, and you reveal on their turn. The top tells you if you show a secret room from a hand, they consider it. And if you're playing in one mode, they may have weird preferences like, I'm going to pick the room I have nothing with, or I'm going to pick the room I have the most of, so on and so forth. If you're playing the introvert mode, you literally only look at these diamonds. They don't care. The introvert is very simple. You will have a hand of tiles out, and that's what you draft. Now, when picking of them, they are going to look at, depending on these rules, or if it's the introvert, it usually could be anything. This 7 will tell you what they pick. So usually if they look at only these 3 tiles, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's the one they actually pick out of the 3 that are legal options. You, of course, will be using these 2 castles or just the one, depending on the mode, to signal which one you want. But that can still be picked and you're like, well, that one's not available anymore. You'll be building either your own castle or between the 2 castles if you're playing the Automa mode. And they come with reference sheets to know how to rotate between the turn order for the Automa mode, and as well as how many tiles should be left per round. This is very nice considering there are multiple times I wanted to make sure whose turn it was and how many tiles there should be. You're going to keep going until you go through a certain number of hands depending on the mode, and compared to a chart like this one's actually for the introvert mode, but there's one for the Automa mode as well. And of course, you can make it more difficult by giving them just more tiles so when they score. As like I said, you can see up here, they score based on number of tiles, so the more tiles they have in a column, the more points it's worth. That is what this expansion has to offer. It adds some new fun tiles, not just in the actual new room types, but they include some more of the other ones as well, including a couple promo tiles that I assume were given out earlier that are obvious based on either other review channels or even their own games like Scythe and stuff. But I think for me, what was really the big thing, I do like those new rooms, was the new modes. It's obvious they were like, okay, we really should have a single player mode in here, and here are 2 different ways for you to play it, as well as someone maybe just wants to build their own castle. They don't want to have to look at 2 different castles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you tried out the solo mode. I did not. So for you, did it feel just as satisfying and engaging as the multiplayer mode?
It's enjoyable. The problem I think that people will have, and maybe I'm wrong on this, it didn't feel the drafting as much because it felt a bit more random with this deck, what could come out of it. Like sometimes they're just like, oh, I will like the downstairs, whatever. Because they don't care. They like everything. And you can sort of manipulate, but it didn't feel like nearly as much. Not in a bad way. It's just that if you really like drafting, because when you draft, even though people can pick randomly, usually you're like, okay, I know the person on my right because I'm working with them wants this room, so I'm going to leave that in there. There's, right. I think there's ironically a bit more control I felt with people.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they did it as best they could replicating,
yes.
Because there's something when you're drafting tiles, you cannot imitate a human's brain. Really.
I still think it was fun in its own right, and I think that was probably, as you said, good enough, and that way you can still buy this and not feel like I'm only taking this out when we have 6 people. I mean, it can go down the less, but usually for a drafting game, you want a lot of people. And that's why I also like that they add we add enough tiles that you can have 8 people now.
Yeah, that's a nice thing. And also because this game is mostly all simultaneous play, it's not like adding another player increases the game time. It doesn't really increase complexity. It works very seamlessly, I think. And I really do like the new tile types. I think they're interesting because they offer exactly some of the things that were missing from the original game. I mean, without overcomplicating things. The secret room, which is just, duplicate whatever it's next to. Again, it's very interesting and it adds a lot of strategic possibilities. It could do some crazy things to your score if you use it well, but it doesn't change the rules at all. It just works as is.
It also, I think, adds like almost a safety valve, because sometimes, for example, I mean, this is not a castle layout, but let's say you only got the 2 orange rooms and you really want to get that third one. The secret room counts as that orange room for bonus and stuff. So there is no special secret room because it just triggers the others.
Right.
And the music one is fun because most of the rooms are what do you have, and now the music room is make sure what you don't have. So I think it does that opposite mindset, which is helpful. And then the ballrooms are great because that adds a way to be even more interacting with your neighbors. Because yes, you work together. So like Jonathan and I were working on a castle here, but Jonathan has another castle over there, which I'm next to, but I'm like, I don't know. I can't have too much influence. And maybe in that one, you and the partner are building a lot of blue rooms. You're getting a lot of points because that works for you. I'm like, if I get the ballroom and a lot of blue points, you're now helping me again.
Right,
So I think there's something else you have to worry about.
Yeah, it reminds me of like in Suburbia, a sort of similar kind of tile placement game where you're much more need to be conscious of who has what in anyone's given play area. Whereas in this one, it's like just enough that I find it fun to be like, oh, I need to be kind of mindful of what's going on, but I don't need to constantly be checking.
Yeah.
Hold on, do you have this? Do I have this? How many points is this worth? It's again like just enough to be interesting without overwhelming things, which I liked.
You won't have to stand up and walk around the room now and be like, okay, what's the castle that's like 3 people away from you?
Yeah. Even if it's still just your immediate left and right, maybe you have to go one more person down. Right.
Maybe,
That's
yes.
the only
I do think that this expansion won't be the game changer if you didn't like this. Like, I don't think it does anything. I like the variants, but I also like the base game. I don't see how those variants would change things up too much. But I think if you do like this game and you like drafting, I think this would be a very easy one to pick up. One, that container we showed actually connects with the yellow one, so it fits really nicely in the box still. There isn't too much I think you have to worry about in that case. I think the 2 new room types, obviously they add some more variety, or I guess 3 room technically if you count the ballroom. I forgot to count that one. They add the variety and they add different I think much more different rooms than simply just we added more orange and yellow rooms, which they did, but I think it's something actually you'd be interested in. And obviously having the solo variants and the other variants are always really nice to have, so you have more ways to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't show them off too much, but of course there are more new tiles just in all of the other types. There's also some new bonus cards and things that you might get from certain bonuses of placing tiles and stuff like that. So there's just more variety overall, which is another area where I think, like you pointed out with these secret rooms, it's kind of nice to have those because there's more tiles. There's going to be a slightly increased randomness of getting the types that you want, perhaps. But it's one of those expansions that doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. It just adds a couple new wrinkles, but in a way that I like, because even if you're teaching this game to people for the first time, I think it's very easy. It's just a couple more types. There's nothing really hard to wrap your mind around, nothing new, nothing crazy in terms of the new concepts you're understanding. And at the end of the day, playing this, it's something where I would always want these new tiles to be involved.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's not the game changer, like I said, in terms of changing our mind. But if you do like this, it is an obvious grab. I think it will always add to the game. I mean, yes, it's new tiles, so that means more shuffling, but I think you've already passed that boat if you got the base game. And I think the new room types will keep things interesting, and you'll now be able to play it maybe if no one's able to show up to a game night.
Yeah. All good stuff. Or if you have that extra person at game night, nice to cover your bases, expand the game a little bit in both directions. So definitely, if you're a fan of Between Two Castles, look into this. The fact that it's so small, it's not gonna, it'll fit into the main box. You don't need to worry about overcomplications. Just a couple of extra layers, but maybe you have different feelings about it that you could give us in the comments down below. Maybe there's a particular tile type you really do or don't like. Or maybe you found some kind of crazy broken strategy with these new tiles. I don't know. Or maybe you just want to share, I don't know, what are some of your high scores with the solo modes? It'd be interesting to find out how people are faring on those.
Yeah, have you been able to make it to the top rank? Let us know in those comments. Until then, I'm Will.
I'm Jonathan.
And this has been a Roll for Crit expansion review. It's time for this video to come to a close. But before you leave, hit that like and subscribe. It helps out a lot. And if you can support us on Patreon, that would mean a lot too. If you still really like us, you can maybe buy some merch off our merch store. We've got a lot of cool designs with new stuff released on a regular basis, so don't forget to check it out.